Good morning, everybody. It is great to be back with you this week. I took a little bit of time off last week to work on the house, and as life would have it, I also got sick on Saturday night, and somebody else would have had to preach for me anyway. So we had lots of time to prepare. But it is great to be with you. I want to welcome our guests. We're so glad that you're here. Whether you're here in person or whether you're joining us online, we're grateful that you're here. I hope that you are as thankful to be here and as blessed to be here as I am. You know, it is Thanksgiving time, and you know that it's Thanksgiving time because if you go into the store, you'll see sales and Christmas decorations everywhere. That's how you know it's Christmas time. It's no longer Halloween decorations, now it's Christmas time. That's how you know that it's Thanksgiving time. All right. I find it interesting that it is around the one time of year that we as a nation have set aside to be thankful, that we spend so much time focused on extravagance, right? I mean, we sit down at a meal together, right, with table just bursting at the seams, and after we have stuffed ourselves to the point of being groggy, we then run out of the house to get away from the family we came to see so we can go shop until we drop. Right? I mean, there nothing more sums up the American mindset, I think, than that. But I'm not going to talk too much about that aspect of things. But being thankful is an important thing. And the next couple of weeks we're going to spend being thankful. I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful for this congregation and for the chance that I have to serve you all. For the last year and a half that I've been able to serve you guys, you've taken such good care of us. And I'm so grateful, so very grateful to all of you for all of that. And I hope that you know that. So often I think in the process of being thankful, we forget to say it. We just assume it. Right? And one time a year we take to stop and be thankful. And that's one of the reasons why we put the tree back there this year, is we wanted to participate in the practice of being thankful. So if you haven't already, make sure you go back there. We have two sets of leaves. We have a set of leaves, and this is the set of leaves I'm going to be talking about a little bit today, which are maple leaves, right? We know that because, you know, it's on the Canadian flag, right? The maple syrup. The maple leaves are different colors, different life situations you find yourself in. These are prayer request leaves, right? Because we have things that we're thoughtful about, things that are going on in our mind, things we're wrestling with. And it's important that we share those requests for prayer. Next week we're going to be talking about the other side of those things, which is just the Thanksgiving side. Just being thankful. And there's another set of leaves back there, color-coded as well, kind of to fit your stage of life. And you probably all have at least one, if not two different stages of life that you kind of can fit in back there, but areas that you're thankful for. For instance, as a parent, I'm thankful for Bluey. I'm grateful for TV shows like Bluey, where I'm not losing brain cells and my kids love it, and I will watch it even if they walk off, right? But we have things we're thankful for, right? We're thankful for internet. We're thankful for family. We're thankful for all sorts of things. But one of the interesting things about thankfulness and Thanksgiving specifically is the history of Thanksgiving in this country. I don't know if you know this, but Thanksgiving has not always taken place on one day a year on the fourth Thursday of the month of November. It has moved around quite a bit. And often, from even George Washington, it was proclamation days of Thanksgiving and prayer that were issued. And it's a very interesting story. I won't bore you with all the details. But these days of Thanksgiving were issued based upon both good things and bad things that were happening within our nation. For instance, one of the people who often issued days and proclamations of Thanksgiving was Abraham Lincoln. And while the country was at war and divided amongst itself, he would issue these days of thanksgiving and prayer sometimes when there would be a Union victory, and sometimes when even there was a defeat. It was in 1863, after a Union victory, that he issued one of these days of praise and thanksgiving on the fourth Thursday of November. And even though they had just had a victory and the war was going well at that point, one of the things that he made sure to mention is the loss of life that had allowed those victories to be made possible. And he specifically mentioned in there a request for prayer for the orphans and the widows and the mourners due to those losses. When we think about Thanksgiving, when we think about the process of being thankful, it's often paired with challenges. We're thankful for something because of difficulties that have happened. And we see this throughout the Bible as well. The days of Thanksgiving, though sometimes connected with harvest and a festival of something like that, the concept of being thankful and being prayerful is found throughout the Scriptures, and is a practice that God called his people to over and over again. And quite frankly, all of the major holidays within the Old Testament, within Judaism, are tied to, in some way, thankfulness and a call to prayer. One of the stories that came to my mind as I was thinking about prayer and hardship and these kind of things is the story that we see in Acts chapter 12. We're going to start here in verse 1. About that time, Herod the king laid violent hands upon some who belonged to the church. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And when he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. This was during the days of unleavened bread, or the Passover. And when he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him over to 40 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending that after the Passover to bring him out to the people. So Peter was kept in prison, but earnest prayer was made for him by the church. This is one of those interesting situations, right? The church finds itself on the anniversary of Jesus' death, on the anniversary, or the eve of the anniversary of his resurrection. And they have just lost one of the apostles. James has been arrested and killed, becoming the second known martyr of the church. And the church is in mourning during what should be a time of celebration as they are thinking about Christ and his sacrifice upon the cross and what that means for us, everything we just did around the communion table together. And in this time of celebration, they're also in mourning over this brother who has been lost, this leader amongst them who has been lost. And on top of all of that is this wonderful celebration of the Passover, a time of thanksgiving, a time of reflection, a time of prayer, a time of being together as a family. And on top of that, you have Peter being arrested, and he is for sure going to be killed. Right? Because that's what the political time is demanding. And Herod's looking for some cheap victories, some easy victories. But what does the church do? In this moment of time when they're dealing with great joy, but also great sorrow and great uncertainty, what is the church doing? They go to God earnestly in prayer. They are greatly devoted to seeking God in prayer. Just because we spend time in prayer doesn't mean things get easy. It doesn't make things easy. I think about James chapter 1. He says, "Consider it pure joy when you face trials of various kinds." Not because we should rejoice in the hardship, rejoice in the sorrow, but we rejoice and we take joy in knowing how the challenges transform us, how they change us. And we're grateful for that. He goes on, amidst that sorrow, amidst that challenge of difficulty, he says this in verse 5, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith, not doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For such a person should not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is double-minded and unstable in all his ways. If God is not able to answer our prayer, why are we praying? If God is not able to answer, why are we praying to Him? If God does not hear us, why would we pray? How foolish would it be to go to God in prayer if we didn't believe that God could do something about it? Or we didn't believe God heard us? When we're going through challenges, when we're going through these difficult moments that James says, hey, consider it pure joy. But when you want to understand what's going on and what the benefit is and what God's trying to do in your life, or maybe how you can be molded by this in a positive way, he says, go to God in prayer, but make sure if you do so that you go believing. Because God's going to answer that prayer. But know that God hears you. Believe that He hears you. Know that He hears you. And know that He is able to make a difference in your life. That He's able to answer that prayer. When we pray on somebody's behalf about a health issue, we are not limited to what the doctors are able to do. We serve a God who is able to do far and above, exceedingly beyond what we could even ask or imagine. Now that doesn't mean that that's what God's going to do. But that's the God we serve. And very much like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did, standing before Nebuchadnezzar, and said, we don't have to defend ourselves before you in this matter. We want you to know, O king, that the God we serve, He is able to save us from your hand. But we want you to know that even if He does not, we're not going to bow down. Here we stand, we can do no other. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were bound and thrown into that furnace of furnaces, they did not know what would happen. But they knew that God heard them, and they knew that God could answer them. And they had faith. And despite the challenges and despite the struggles, they had faith. Now, let's go back to this earnest prayer. Peter's sitting in prison. He is chained between two guards. He's behind a locked door. There's guards guarding him, and he's within a facility that is also guarded and well maintained. He can't get out. There is no hope of him getting out. And he has a death sentence on his door. And the church is earnestly praying for him. And all of a sudden, as he's sleeping between these two guards, he wakes up to an angel kicking him on the side, saying, hey, get up. He goes, huh? What? And his chains fall off. He's like, well, that's interesting. Chains don't normally do that. He's like, follow me. And he begins to follow him, and doors begin to automatically open, which, like, we're used to, right? You walk through Walmart, the doors automatically open, right? This is not something that normally happens in the first century world. Doors are just automatically opening, and he's like, wow, this must be a dream. There's no way this is actually happening. And it's not until he is outside, past all the guards, past all the security measures, and he's walking the streets, and the angel disappears, and he goes, wait, that just really happened? And he kind of comes to his senses, and he's like, okay, now I gotta, where's the church? So the church is meeting in John Mark's mother's house. That's where they're going to be meeting. So he goes there. That's where their prayer meeting is at. And they're earnestly praying. They're beseeching God on behalf of Peter. And then there's a knock at the door. I think I got ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and read here. Acts chapter 12. Acts chapter 12, starting in verse 14. Recognizing Peter's voice, her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran and reported that Peter was standing at the gate. And they said to her, "You're out of your mind." But she kept insisting that it was so, and they kept saying, "It's his angel. It's his messenger." But Peter continued to knock, and when they opened, they saw him and were amazed. But motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had brought him out of prison. And he said, "Tell these things to James and to the brothers." And then he departed and went to another place. I love this story. It's so stereotypical us, isn't it? We gather together because something has happened, and we're praying. And we're gathered together and we're praying earnestly, and we're asking for God to beseech, and we're asking for God to interact in this situation and to intervene in this situation. And then God shows up. And we're like, no, that's why we're here. That's Peter can't be here. We're here because Peter's there. Peter's not here. Well, maybe it's his angel. Well, yeah, he sent a messenger, right? He sent somebody, he sent a message to us. We'll get to that in a minute. Like, Peter's not here. And then when they see him, they're just as amazed. Sometimes we're shocked when God shows up, aren't we? And I think that's the wonder of when God shows up. He shows up and he amazes us with the fact that he is able to do these things, because we can't. But how glorious it is when God answers our prayer in the affirmative. Like we talked about in class, though, this morning, even if prayers aren't answered in the affirmative, though, trusting in God, we can celebrate that too. In the midst of sorrow, there can be comfort and joy. In the midst of hardship, there can be joy and thanksgiving. But we should not forget the importance of spending time in prayer. The importance of going to God and talking to him and beseeching him. Having faith. I think at first we look at the story and we go, these people didn't have faith. Right? The young girl goes to the door. They hear somebody knocking. Who is it? "It's me. Open up." "It's Peter." Right? And she runs away. Right? Leaving poor Peter out there going, "They're going to be here any minute. Open the door." Right? And she's just blown away by the fact that the prayer has been answered. And everybody she's telling, the prayer has been answered. They're not believing. No, Peter couldn't be there, possibly. That's why we're here. Join the prayer circle. We'll get to the door in a minute. And at first it seems, well, maybe they didn't believe. But the fact of the matter is, they believed that God heard them. They knew God was hearing them. And they knew that they served a God who could raise the dead. They knew they served a God who could bring them out of Egypt with a mighty outstretched arm. They knew that. It is not a question of whether or not God could bring Peter out of prison. The question is, would he? And they thought probably not. It'd be wonderful if he did. That's why we're beseeching God to do so, but probably not. That's why we're here. And then God showed up. And he answered it in the affirmative, and it just blew everybody's mind. And it brought them so much joy. But we should not forget that it is important that we celebrate and we are thankful no matter what the answer is. No matter what the answer is. So here's what I want to encourage you this morning. I want to encourage you in prayer. I want to call you to pray without ceasing. One of the things that I've learned in the last couple of years is the importance of just stopping and praying right there. Because I have a really bad habit, and I imagine most of you do as well. You'll hear something, and you'll say, "Hey, I'll be praying for you in that." And then I don't do it. I mean to, I want to, may have a long prayer list, but I often don't get back to it. But you know what's powerful? To take 10 seconds and just pray right there with them. Not something showy, but something that is right there with them. Because we know God's got it, right? We know that God hears us. We don't have to make a show of it, but we should be praying without ceasing. We should continually be praying. I would encourage you to go back and not only put a leaf on the tree about your prayer requests, to share those things and those struggles that you're going through and those things that are on your heart and your mind. And that can be as anonymous or not as you want it to be. You do not have to put your name on that. But go back not only to put a leaf back there, but also to read some of the leaves. And say a quick prayer for those things. Look at the bulletin. You may be as bad about reading the bulletin as I am, but we have a bulletin. It's available online. Claudine works very hard each week to make sure that's out. And go through there. Here's a few of the prayer requests. Help me grow in my faith. I think all of us could have that one. A prayer for job security. I know that the nation as a whole is dealing with a lot of that right now. Pray for mom, pray for dad. Pray for those frontline workers. Pray for widows and widowers, those who are sick. We have a number of people that we have listed in the bulletin that need our prayers. We have missionaries who desperately need our prayers and encouragement and support. We have the work right here in Harlingen, the work that we're seeking to do right here to impact our community, to show our love and our care for our community. We should be praying about that as well. There's a number of things that we need to be praying about. And I want to encourage you to make this a settled practice in you. To know first and foremost that God hears. To know that He's powerful enough and can and will act, even if it's not the way that you want Him to. And to constantly be in prayer for one another and for the things that are going on. And to know that even amidst the hard things, there can be joy. If you need prayer from the congregation, if you need encouragement and support, please let us know that. You can do that through email or texting the main office line, or me, or one of the elders. But you can also do that here in a minute as we stand and as we sing. So I invite you to please share those things and let us join together in supporting one another in this walk of faith. Let's sing.